Humphrey Littleton and my mother-in-law. My father-in-law was driving home from school for lunch one Friday in June. He usually ate a sandwich at lunchtime, but Friday was fish and chip day. Unfortunately, on that day, his lunch remained uneaten. He had a massive heart attack, crashed into a lamppost and died at the wheel. He was only 57, and his wife, a model obedient Swiss housewife, was devastated. But she soon began to realise a new independence. 2 days after he died, the lavatory seat, which had been cracked for years, was replaced. She traded in his Ford Capri for a DAF automatic, driving a very hard bargain with the salesman, and started driving lessons. The most difficult lessons I ever taught. She sold an antique bureau and went on a Mediterranean cruise, where she met Lionel. He was a good laugh, but was dispensed with when he was seen to have a roving eye. She sold an antique chair and went for a cruise in the Pacific, where she met Erwald. He was rejected on the grounds of parsimony and possibly gold digging. There were further conquests, but I didn't meet them, because I took up a post with the Ministry of Overseas Development in Sana'a, Yemen, writing English language textbooks for the Yemeni Ministry of Education. The British Council was present in Sana'a, and they administered British citizens working for the MOD. They also promoted British culture, and from time to time British artists were invited there to perform. I was excited to learn that Humphrey Littleton and his band were coming, and I offered to collect them from the airport. I'd long been a fan, and I Play As I Please is still one of my favourite LP records. His arrival happened to coincide with the visit of my mother-in-law, who had arrived a few days earlier, having sold another antique. She planned to travel on to Iran after spending a week with us, then revisit on her way home. I drove to the airport in my Toyota Land Cruiser, located Humph and his band, and he clambered aboard along with his girlfriend, Bruce Turner, the clarinet and saxophone player, and their instruments and luggage. The rest of the band went off in another vehicle ahead of us. "Welcome to Yemen," I tritely trotted out. The road to and from the airport was usually quite busy, and I was momentarily surprised to notice there was no traffic except me going in either direction. Then I saw ahead flashing lights, heard sirens and the roar of motorbikes, and I understood. All traffic to and from the airport had been temporarily halted, but somehow the airport police had failed to stop me. As the motorcade appeared round a bend, heading for the airport, 4 outriders on motorbikes skidded to a halt, leapt from their bikes, and levelled machine guns at us. I stopped, wound down the window, wished peace upon them, and pulled off the road. Ali Abdullah Saleh, President of Yemen, shot past in his shiny black Mercedes, littered with national flags. The outriders glared, slung their guns on their backs, and roared off to the airport. Presidential cavalcades were not uncommon at that time, and all soldiers and policemen toted vicious-looking weapons. I turned to my passengers and was about to explain what had happened, but they weren't there. They had buried themselves under their luggage in the back of the Land Cruiser. After some cajoling, they emerged, whitened faces glowing in the dark. "Didn't you say, 'Welcome to Yemen'?" croaked Bruce Turner. Unfortunately for Bruce, his dive for cover had been so urgent that he had strained his back quite badly, so it hurt him to breathe, which makes playing wind instruments quite a lot more difficult. The following day there was a party at the British Council for our guests. My mother-in-law was also invited, and she took quite a shine to one of the band, to such an extent that she wanted to come to the performance at the Sheraton Hotel the next evening. But she was persuaded to stay at home and babysit. It was a great night, But there were no long solos for Bruce, and Humph also had difficulty with his breathing, as Sanaa is 7,500 feet above sea level. I recall them playing a much extended version of Sea Jam Blues. As we left the hotel, there was a smell of burning in the air, and on the homeward drive we heard several gunshots. All the rubbish skips which had passed had been opened and set alight. The smoke and flames mingled with the dust blown around by the wind, creating an eerie atmosphere. I suddenly remembered the eclipse. The gunshots and the fire were to ward off the evil spirits. We arrived home at around 11 p.m. All the lights were on, the kids were asleep, but there was no sign of mother-in-law. We searched high and low, low providing the solution. Mother-in-law was under the double bed in our bedroom. Hearing the gunshots, she assumed the revolution had begun. She decided that it was time to go to Iran. 2 weeks later, I was working with some teachers when I was called to the phone. My wife told me her mother was in custody at the airport. Her visa was single entry and she could not re-enter the country. What could we do? I explained the situation to the teachers. One of them had a husband who worked at the airport, and we arranged to meet there. The drive to the airport was thankfully uneventful. Mother-in-law was there, looking extremely sheepish, sandwiched between two extremely powerful-looking, fully armed black policewomen. After some negotiation, the authorities agreed to let her re-enter the country for 5 days only, but retained her passport. 5 days later, she returned home and sold an antique Chinese vase.